The sound that shattered the evening's delicate harmony wasn't a dropped glass or a burst of laughter. It was a crack, sharp, ugly, and final. It echoed across the polished marble floors of Aria, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. Every head turned. There, under the soft glow of a modern chandelier, stood Robert Thorne, CEO of the tech empire Thorne Dynamics. His hand still raised. Opposite him, his pregnant wife Jennifer cradled her cheek, a single tear tracing a path through her stunned silence. In that single brutal moment, Robert Thorne didn't just strike his wife. He signed the death warrant for his entire world. He just didn't know it yet. Because what he failed to remember was that Jennifer wasn't just Jennifer Thorne. She was Jennifer Davenport, and her brother did not forgive. Life with Robert Thorne was a masterpiece of public relations. To the outside world, they were the golden couple. He was the self-made tech visionary, a charismatic titan whose company, Thorne Dynamics, was pioneering AI integration in logistics. She was Jennifer Hayes Davenport, the graceful architect from a family whose name was etched onto the stone facades of libraries and museums, a quiet symbol of old-world elegance. Their union was seen as the perfect merger of new money ambition and old money class. Their penthouse on Park Avenue was a testament to this image. It was a sterile paradise of glass and steel with panoramic views of Central Park. Every surface was polished, every object curated. But for Jennifer, it felt less like a home and more like a showroom. Her own architectural drafts and models, once her life's passion, were relegated to a small back office, dismissed by Robert as clutter that disrupted the apartment's minimalist aesthetic. Robert loved to show her off. At galas, fundraisers, and board meetings, she was his most prized acquisition. He would hold her hand just a little too tightly, his thumb pressing into her knuckles as a silent reminder of his ownership. He would interrupt her conversations with a booming laugh, redirecting the topic back to his latest success. "Jennifer is the heart of my operation," he'd say. "She keeps the home front perfect, so I can conquer the world." The crowd would applaud, seeing a supportive wife. Jennifer would smile, feeling like a beautifully framed painting, admired but inanimate. The pregnancy, which should have been a joyous bond, became another tool of his control. He dictated her diet, her social schedule, even the prenatal vitamins she took, all under the guise of caring for his son. He had already decided it was a boy, the heir to the Thorne Empire. The cracks in their gilded cage were only visible in private. An argument over her wanting to have lunch with her old friend Clara turned into a lecture on how her associations reflected on him. A married, pregnant woman shouldn't be seen gallivanting around town with a single artist darling. It looks unsettled. His voice, so charming in public, would drop to a low, cold monotone that chilled her to the bone. One Tuesday evening, a month before the incident at Aria, the tension had reached a fever pitch. Julian Davenport, Jennifer's older brother, had called. He was in town from Singapore for 48 hours and wanted to see her. Julian was the antithesis of Robert. Where Robert was a peacock, Julian was a panther. He was the head of Davenport Capital, a global private equity firm, so powerful and discreet it was often referred to as the shadow bank. He rarely appeared in headlines, and he preferred it that way. He was quiet, observant, and fiercely protective of Jennifer, especially since their parents' death a decade prior. "Julian's in town," Jennifer said, trying to keep her voice light as Robert loosened his tie. "He wants to have dinner tomorrow." Robert didn't look up from his phone. "Can't. I have the quarterly earnings call." He said he can have lunch, or even a quick coffee. Robert finally looked at her, his eyes devoid of warmth. Jennifer, your brother is intense. He comes in, asks 100 quiet questions like he's conducting an audit, and makes my entire staff nervous. He represents everything I've fought to overcome the idea that you can only be successful if you're born with a silver spoon. We don't have time for that kind of distraction right now. He's my brother Robert. I haven't seen him in a year. And you'll see him at Christmas, he said, his tone final. He walked over to the bar and poured himself a whiskey. Besides, you're supposed to be resting. Doctor's orders. My orders. You're far too emotional when you're around him. It's not good for the baby. She stood there, clutching her phone, the message from Julian still glowing on the screen. Just want to see you're happy, Jenny. That's all. She felt a profound sense of shame as she typed back a lie about a demanding schedule. This was her cage. The bars weren't iron. They were made of Robert's ambition, his insecurities, and his suffocating control. And with each passing day, she could feel the air getting thinner. The invitation to the opening of Aria was a command performance. It was the new restaurant by celebrity chef Antoine Dubois, and the guest list was a who's who of New York's elite. For Robert, it was a prime networking opportunity. For Jennifer, it was another night of playing the perfect wife. She chose a simple but elegant deep blue maternity gown, one that made her feel confident. When she came out, Robert looked her up and down. "A bit plain, isn't it?" he commented, adjusting his own $5,000 Tom Ford suit. "You should have worn the diamond earrings I bought you." "They felt too heavy tonight," she said softly. "It's not about what you feel, Jennifer. It's about the image we present. Strength, success." He sighed as if her simple comfort was a personal burden. "Never mind. It's too late now." At the restaurant, Robert was in his element, moving from table to table, his voice a confident boom in the sophisticated hum of the room. Jennifer followed in his wake, smiling until her cheeks ached. As Robert was engrossed in a conversation with a tech journalist, a familiar voice called her name. Jennifer Hayes. She turned to see Robert Vance, a kind, brilliant architect she had collaborated with on a prize-winning library design years ago before she had met Robert. He had a warm smile and kind eyes. "Robert." "My goodness, what are you doing here?" A genuine smile, the first of the night, graced her lips. "My firm designed the acoustics for this place," he said with a proud grin. "It's wonderful to see you. You're glowing." They chatted for a few minutes, falling into the easy camaraderie of old friends discussing new materials, sustainable design, and the changing New York skyline. For those few moments, Jennifer felt like herself again, the intelligent, passionate architect, not just the tycoon's wife. She laughed, a real, unburdened laugh, and it was that sound that drew Robert's attention. He strode over his smile, tight and cold. He slid an arm possessively around Jennifer's waist, his fingers digging into her side. "Darling, you shouldn't be tiring yourself out." He nodded curtly at Robert. "Robert Thorne. My wife and I were just leaving." Robert, sensing the icy tension, quickly excused himself. "It was great seeing you, Jennifer. Congratulations on everything." The moment he was gone, Robert's grip tightened. "What was that?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "That was Robert Vance, an old colleague," Jennifer whispered back, trying not to cause a scene. Laughing like a schoolgirl. "Do you have any idea how that looks?" "My pregnant wife flirting with some nobody while I'm trying to close a deal with Forbes. It's disrespectful." "I wasn't flirting, Robert. We were just talking about architecture." Her voice trembled slightly, a mix of fear and defiance. I'm allowed to have a conversation. That word, allowed, was the spark that lit the fuse. His face, usually a mask of controlled charisma, twisted into a snarl of pure rage. He saw her defiance as a public challenge to his authority. You are allowed nothing that embarrasses me. He spat his voice, rising just enough to turn the heads of the nearest tables. You seem to have forgotten your place, Jennifer. My place, she said, her own anger finally boiling over the fear. My place is not to be your silent, smiling accessory. I am a person, Robert, not a possession. And then it happened. In the heart of the crowded restaurant with dozens of eyes on them, he slapped her. The sound was a whip crack. It wasn't a shove or a grab. It was a deliberate, open-palmed strike across her face that sent her stumbling back a step. A collective gasp went through the room. The ambient chatter ceased. There was only a ringing in Jennifer's ears and the hot, stinging shame on her cheek. She looked at Robert at the utter shock and fury in his eyes, and she saw him for what he truly was. A weak, cruel man, terrified of losing control. Time seemed to slow down. She saw the flash of a phone camera from a corner table. She saw the horrified look on the face of the journalist Robert had been courting. She saw her entire life, this lie she had been living, shatter into a million irreparable pieces. Without another word, Jennifer turned. She walked away from him, her posture unnaturally straight, a queen abandoning a corrupt court. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She walked with a chilling, newfound purpose. Past the stunned waiters, past the whispering patrons, she walked out of the restaurant and into the cool night air. She hailed the first taxi. She saw her hand trembling as she opened her clutch. She didn't call her friend Clara. She didn't call for a car service. There was only one person on earth whose help she needed now. She found his number and pressed the call button. He answered on the first ring, his voice calm and clear, despite the 12-hour time difference. "Julian," she whispered, and then a single heart-breaking sob escaped her lips. "Julian, I need you." The line was silent for a beat. Then his voice came back, stripped of all warmth, and forged into something cold, hard, and lethal. "Where are you, Jenny?" "I'm on my way." Julian Davenport's penthouse in Singapore was the physical embodiment of his mind, precise, minimalist, and commanding, an unparalleled view of the world. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering expanse of Marina Bay. But Julian wasn't looking at the view. He was staring at the encrypted video call on the large monitor in his study. The call had ended 10 minutes ago, but the image of Jennifer's bruised cheek was seared into his memory. He hadn't raged. He hadn't shouted. When his sister's call had come through, his first priority was her safety. Within minutes, his global security team was activated. A private jet was being fueled at a Teterboro airport hangar. A secure penthouse at the Mandarin Oriental in New York, registered to a shell corporation, was being prepared for her arrival. His most trusted operative in New York, a stoic ex-Mossad agent named Elias, was already en route to her location with instructions to retrieve her and ensure no one followed. Only now, with Jennifer safe and on her way to the secure location, did Julian allow the mask of calm to slip. But it wasn't replaced by fury. It was replaced by a stillness that was far more terrifying. He moved from his desk to the window, the city lights reflecting in his dark, unblinking eyes. Robert Thorne. He had never trusted him. He had seen the desperate hunger in the man's eyes, the over-eager charm that masked a deep-seated insecurity. Julian had run a background check on Robert before the wedding. A deep, invasive div that went far beyond what any journalist could find. He knew about the borderline unethical tactics Robert had used to push out a co-founder in his early days. He knew about his father's bankruptcy, a source of profound shame for Robert. He knew the man was a house of cards built on a foundation of ego. Julian had warned Jennifer in his own quiet way. "He performs, Jenny," he had told her once. "Make sure you know who he is when the audience is gone." But she had been in love, and he had respected her choice, vowing only to watch from a distance. That distance was now gone. Robert Thorne had crossed a line that was not just a moral boundary, but a demarcation of Julian's world. You did not touch his family. He picked up a sleek encrypted satellite phone and made a single call. Not to a lawyer, not to the police, but to a man known only as Mr. Harrison. Harrison was the architect of Davenport Capital's most complex and hostile takeovers. He was a whisper in the financial world, a ghost who could dismantle a Fortune 500 company with a few keystrokes and a series of perfectly timed leaks. "Harrison," Julian said, his voice flat. "Clear my schedule, and clear yours. We have a new project, a demolition." "Target." Harrison's voice was dry, devoid of curiosity. "Thorne Dynamics. CEO Robert Thorne." There was a brief pause. "That's a tech darling, Julian. Market cap of 20 billion. Aggressive growth." "The market cap is an illusion," Julian stated, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's built on hype leverage and the force of one man's personality. A personality which is about to be systematically discredited and destroyed." He began to pace slowly, the plan forming in his mind, not as a list, but as a multi-pronged interconnected web. "I don't want to just hurt him, Harrison. I want to erase him. I want his name to become a cautionary tale whispered at board meetings. I want him to lose everything, not with a bang, but with a slow, agonizing bleed. He built his empire on his reputation. We will turn that reputation into poison." The strategy was laid out with surgical precision. Phase 1. The narrative. "I want you to use our contacts in the press, not the tabloids, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times. We start with anonymous tips from concerned shareholders. We question their Q3 growth projections. We raise subtle doubts about the scalability of their new AI platform Nexus. We make the market nervous." Phase 2, the financials. "I want a team of forensic accountants to tear through every public filing of Thorne Dynamics, every footnote, every appendix. Find the legal but ethically questionable accounting practices, the aggressive revenue recognition, the capitalization of expenses. We don't need to find a crime yet. We just need to find the soft spots." Phase 3. The human element. Julian continued, his voice dropping. "Thorne has a COO, Davies Johnson. Ambitious, competent, but living in Thorne's shadow. I want a full profile on him. His finances, his career goals, his frustrations. Every man has a price or a breaking point. We are going to find him." "And finally," Julian said, stopping in front of the window. "The personal." He finally looked down at his own hands. "He humiliated my sister in public. We will make sure that story is told. But not yet. We will let the financial pressure build first. When he is at his most vulnerable, when his back is against the wall, we will introduce the world to the real Robert Thorne. We will let Jennifer's story be the final devastating blow that shatters whatever is left." He ended the call. He stood in the silence of his penthouse, a general surveying a battlefield that only he could see. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge was messy emotional. This was about rebalancing the scales. It was about a quiet, methodical, and absolute annihilation. Robert Thorne had thrown a punch in a bar fight. Julian Davenport was about to deploy a navy. The giant was awake. 2 weeks after the incident at Aria, the world had seemingly forgotten. A few blurry phone pictures had surfaced on gossip sites captioned with speculation about a heated argument. But Robert's formidable team, led by the ruthless Eleanor Vance, had successfully killed the story. They painted it as an invasion of privacy, threatening litigation against anyone who suggested otherwise. Robert had tried to call Jennifer dozens of times, his messages evolving from frantic, faux pious apologies to bitter, threatening accusations. She never answered. Under Julian's protection, she was a ghost. To the world and to Robert, it seemed the storm had passed. He felt a surge of arrogant relief. He had weathered it. He still had his kingdom. He was chairing a board meeting, boasting about the projected adoption rate for the Nexus platform, when his CFO's tablet chimed with a news alert. A headline from the Wall Street Journal. The CFO, a portly man named George, paled slightly as he read it. "Robert," he interrupted, "you need to see this." The article was titled "Thorne's Nexus, a House of Cards Investors Question Q4 Projections Amidst Scalability Concerns." It was a masterfully written piece of corporate assassination. It didn't make any direct accusations. Instead, it was filled with carefully phrased questions and quotes from unnamed industry analysts and former employees. It questioned whether Thorne Dynamics was promising more than its technology could deliver. It hinted at an over-reliance on a few key clients. It subtly suggested that the company's meteoric rise was perhaps more dazzle than substance. Robert read it, a cold fury rising in his chest. Who is this reporter? Find out who she spoke to. This is slander. But the damage was immediate. By the end of the day, Thorne Dynamics stock had dipped by 9%. Not a crash, but a significant tremor. Robert dismissed it publicly as market jitters fueled by baseless speculation. But privately, he was rattled. This was the first move in Julian's campaign. Mr. Harrison had leveraged a contact deep within the financial press, a veteran journalist named Sarah Jennings, who had a reputation for unearthing corporate rot. Harrison's team had fed her a breadcrumb trail, just enough verifiable data to make her curious. They pointed her toward public records showing that Thorne Dynamics' biggest client had an interlocking board member, a fact that was public but buried. They gave her anonymous but credible testimony from a disgruntled engineer who had left the company months ago complaining about the pressure to overstate Nexus's capabilities. Jennings did the rest. Simultaneously, Julian initiated Phase 2. From a discreet office in Zurich, his forensic accounting team worked around the clock. They found what they were looking for, not in illegalities, but in aggressive accounting choices. Thorne Dynamics was capitalizing its software development costs in a way that was technically legal under GAAP rules, but was widely viewed as a method to inflate short-term profits. This information was leaked not to the press, but to a highly respected short seller, a hedge fund manager named Nicholas Croft, known for his devastatingly thorough research reports. 2 days after the WSJ article, Croft Capital released a 50-page report titled Thorne Dynamics, a Reality Distortion Field. The report eviscerated the company's financials. It accused Thorne of pulling forward future revenue and using accounting gimmicks to mask slowing user growth. The market reacted violently. The stock plummeted another 18%. Robert was in a blind panic. He was on the phone, screaming at his investors, his PR team, and his lawyers. "This is a coordinated attack," "Someone is trying to sink us," he bellowed, pacing his office like a caged animal. He was right, but he had no idea who was pulling the strings. He suspected a rival tech firm, perhaps a disgruntled former executive. The name Julian Davenport never once crossed his mind. Julian was old money private equity. He didn't engage in grubby market battles like this. He was above it all. It was the perfect cover. While Robert was fighting fires on Wall Street, Jennifer was in a quiet, sun-drenched penthouse overlooking the Hudson River. Julian had flown in, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of peace. He didn't talk about his plans for Robert. He simply took care of her. He hired a private prenatal yoga instructor and a nutritionist. He filled the apartment with books on architecture and brought her a state-of-the-art drafting table. "You should start designing again, Jenny," he said one afternoon, watching her sketch in a notepad. "Even if it's just for yourself. Don't let him take that from you, too." Slowly, she began to heal. The fear began to recede, replaced by a quiet, simmering anger and a resolve she didn't know she possessed. She started working on a design for a community library, pouring her pain and hope into the lines and angles on the page. One evening, she saw the news about Thorne Dynamics' stock troubles. She looked at Julian, who was reading a book across the room. "Is this you?" she asked softly. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "He hurt you," he said simply, as if that were the only explanation required. "This is just the consequence." Jennifer felt a complex wave of emotions. It wasn't glee. It was a grim sense of justice. She thought about the man who had dismissed her passion as clutter, who had tried to shrink her world until it fit into the palm of his hand. She nodded slowly. "Don't stop," she said, her voice steady and clear. And in that moment, she was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, and she was ready for the fight. The next month was a slow-motion nightmare for Robert Thorne. The Whisper campaign had become a roar. Every financial news channel seemed to have a panel of experts dissecting the Croft Capital report. The initial 27% drop in stock value was just the beginning. It continued to bleed day by day as investor confidence evaporated. A major contract with a European logistics conglomerate, which Robert had been counting on as his big Q4 win, was suddenly indefinitely postponed. The official reason was market volatility. But Robert knew the truth. No one wanted to board a sinking ship. He became a man possessed by paranoia. He saw conspiracies everywhere. He fired 2 senior executives for disloyalty when they questioned his increasingly erratic strategy. He ordered sweeps of his office for listening devices. The charismatic, confident CEO was gone, replaced by a haggard, wild-eyed tyrant. His primary target was his COO, Davies Johnson. Davies was the operational brain of Thorne Dynamics. While Robert was the face-charming investors and the press, Davies was the one who made the trains run on time. He was meticulous, pragmatic, and increasingly worried. He saw Robert's refusal to address the accounting allegations head-on as corporate suicide. "Robert, we need to release a statement, clarify our capitalization policy," Davies urged in a tense executive meeting. "We need to be transparent to stop the bleeding." "Transparent?" Robert sneered, his face pale with stress. "Transparency is a weakness. It's admitting they're right. We double down. We announce a new product. We project even higher growth. We show them we're not scared. Our projections are already seen as fantasy." Davies countered, his voice rising. "This will look delusional." "Are you questioning my leadership, Davies?" Robert shot back, his eyes narrowing. "Because I'm seeing a lot of doubt from you lately. I need warriors, not warriors. This was the moment Julian's team had been waiting for. Phase 3 was activated. Through a series of encrypted anonymous emails, Mr. Harrison's team began to feed information to Davies Johnson. The first email was simple. It contained a single attachment, a draft of a press release prepared by Robert's PR team. The draft outlined a corporate restructuring in which the company would blame operational inefficiencies for its current woes. The fall guy for these inefficiencies was implicitly and clearly the COO. The second email arrived 2 days later. It contained flight manifests and hotel bookings, showing that Robert had been secretly meeting with a prominent executive search firm, specifically interviewing candidates for a new chief operating officer. The final email was the most damning. It was a secretly recorded audio file from the early days of the company. On it, Robert could be heard talking to his then lawyer about how to structure the co-founder's exit package to minimize his equity stake using language that was callous and borderline fraudulent. The metadata was scrubbed, its origin untraceable, but the voice was unmistakably Robert's. The unspoken message was clear. This is what he does to people who are no longer useful to him. You are next. Davies Johnson felt the blood drain from his face. He had dedicated the last 8 years of his life to building Thorn Dynamics. He had worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed time with his family, and poured every ounce of his talent into the company, all while Robert took the credit. He had believed in the vision, but now he saw the truth. He was just another disposable cog in the machine of Robert's ego. The loyalty he felt evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard instinct of self-preservation. Meanwhile, Robert was unraveling. The pressure was immense. He wasn't sleeping. He was drinking heavily. He called a company-wide all-hands meeting, hoping to rally his employees with a charismatic speech. But the man who stood before them was not the visionary leader they once admired. He was gaunt, defensive, and angry. He blamed short sellers, jealous rivals, and a vindictive media for their problems. He promised a glorious comeback, but his words rang hollow. The employees looked at each other with fear and uncertainty. The magic was gone. That night alone in his cavernous penthouse, Robert smashed a $10,000 bottle of scotch against the wall. The empire he had built with his bare hands was crumbling around him, and he didn't know why. He felt utterly alone, hunted by an enemy he couldn't see. He tried to call Jennifer again for the 100th time, but this time the number was disconnected. The last link was severed. The walls were closing in, and in the terrifying silence of his self-made prison, he finally began to understand that he was not the hunter. He was the prey. The emergency board meeting was called by Davies Johnson and 2 other senior board members. The air in the 50th floor boardroom was thick with tension. Robert sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of defiant fury. He thought this was a challenge to his authority, a mutiny he could crush with threats and bravado. "I understand some of you are nervous," he began, his voice strained. "But let me be clear. This is a temporary setback. I will not let these baseless attacks destroy the company I built." Davies Johnson let him finish. Then he calmly placed a tablet in the center of the polished mahogany table. "Robert, this isn't about the media attacks. This is about your leadership." He swiped the screen, bringing up the internal documents he, with the anonymous help, had compiled. He presented evidence of Robert's plan to make him the scapegoat. He showed them the travel records detailing Robert's secret search for his replacement, and then he played the audio file. The scratchy recording of a younger Robert Thorne, callously plotting to screw over his co-founder, filled the silent room. It was raw, damning, and it revealed the true character of the man behind the charismatic facade. The board members, men and women who valued stability and fiduciary duty above all else, listened with hardening expressions. The person on that tape was not a leader. He was a liability. "The market has lost faith in you, Robert," Davies said, his voice steady. "The employees have lost faith in you, and frankly so have I. Your erratic behavior is now the single greatest threat to this company's survival. Therefore, we are filing a motion for your immediate removal as CEO and chairman of the board, pending an internal investigation into the financial practices brought to light by the Croft report." Robert was stunned into silence. He looked around the table from face to face, searching for an ally. He found only cold, calculating eyes staring back at him. These were the people who had praised him at galas, who had clapped him on the back for his genius. Now they looked at him like he was a disease to be cured. His kingdom had turned on him. Betrayal sharp and absolute pierced through his arrogance. But Julian's plan was not complete. The corporate execution was only one blade of the scissors. The other was about to close. That very afternoon, a story broke, not in the financial press, but in a high-profile, respected publication like the New Yorker. It was a long-form article, beautifully written and devastatingly effective. The author was a renowned feminist journalist, known for her sensitive and powerful profiles of women. The title was simple, The Architect. The article was about Jennifer. It told her story not as a victim, but as a brilliant woman whose career and identity had been slowly suffocated by a controlling husband. It detailed her early successes in architecture, her passion for sustainable community spaces. It painted a vivid picture of her life inside the gilded cage, and then with quiet, factual precision, it described the night at Aria. The story was corroborated by 3 eyewitnesses, including the Forbes journalist Robert had been so eager to impress. A grainy but clear photo, the one taken on a cell phone that night, was published alongside the article. It showed Robert, his face contorted in rage, his hand raised. It showed Jennifer, her expression a mixture of shock and pain. The story was the final, fatal blow. It gave a human face to the corporate scandal. Robert wasn't just an arrogant CEO who played fast and loose with the numbers. He was a bully, an abuser. The narrative was now complete. The personal and the professional had converged into a perfect storm of public condemnation. The hashtag, Justice for Jennifer, began trending worldwide. Women's advocacy groups issued statements. The polished image Robert had spent a lifetime and millions of dollars constructing was shattered in a single afternoon. He was no longer just a failed CEO. He was a monster. When he was finally escorted out of the Thorn Dynamics building by security, a box of his personal items in his hands, he was met by a swarm of reporters. The questions weren't about stock prices or accounting practices. "Mr. Thorn, do you have a comment on the abuse allegations?" "Robert, why did you hit your pregnant wife?" He stared into the blinding flash of the cameras, his empire gone, his name a synonym for disgrace. And in that moment of absolute ruin, he finally understood. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't a market downturn. This was an execution. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him to his soul who had signed the order. The fall of Robert Thorn was swift and total. The board appointed Davies Johnson as interim CEO, who immediately initiated a full, transparent audit, cooperating with the now inevitable SEC investigation. The stock, after one final catastrophic plunge, was delisted. Thorn Dynamics, was dismantled, its valuable patents and assets sold off for pennies on the dollar to competitors. The empire was officially erased. Robert was left with nothing but legal bills and public scorn. The friends who had once clamored for his attention now crossed the street to avoid him. He was a pariah. His divorce from Jennifer was finalized quickly and quietly. He lost the penthouse, the cars, the entire apparatus of his former life. The last anyone heard, he was living in a small rented apartment in a different state, a ghost of the man he once was. But this story was never truly about his fall. It was about Jennifer's rise. She did not celebrate Robert's demise. She watched the news with a distant, detached sadness, not for him, but for the years she had lost. Her victory was not in his ruin, but in her own reclamation. 2 months later, Jennifer gave birth to a healthy baby girl, whom she named Hope. Holding her daughter for the first time, she felt a profound sense of peace. The future was no longer a terrifying void, but a blank canvas. Julian was there, of course. He wasn't a gloating victor, just a quiet, supportive presence. He looked at his niece, a tiny, perfect thing, wrapped in a soft blanket, and a rare, genuine smile touched his lips. His world was in balance again. Jennifer's passion for architecture had been fully reawakened. The community library she had designed while in seclusion had won a prestigious design competition. The project was funded by an anonymous benefactor, a grant from a philanthropic foundation quietly controlled by the Davenport Capital Group. A year later, construction began. Jennifer stood on the site, her daughter babbling happily in a stroller beside her. She was no longer Jennifer Thorne, the tycoon's wife. She was Jennifer Davenport, architect mother survivor. She was a woman who had been trapped in a cage of glass and steel and had found the strength to break free. The library was her masterpiece. It was a structure of light and open space with warm wood and walls of glass that looked out onto a public garden. It was designed to be a sanctuary, a place of quiet strength and endless possibility. It was in every way a reflection of its creator. At the dedication ceremony, Jennifer stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. Julian was in the front row, holding Hope, who was clapping her hands. Jennifer didn't speak of her past. She spoke of the future, of the power of community, and of the importance of building spaces where people could feel safe and inspired. Her life was not a fairy tale. The scars of her time with Robert would always be a part of her. But they were no longer open wounds. They were reminders of her own resilience. She had faced the worst of one man's ego, and had emerged not broken, but stronger, more compassionate, and more dedicated to her craft than ever before. She had lost a prison and gained a universe, and in the quiet hum of her new life, surrounded by love, purpose, and the beautiful library she had built, she was finally, truly free. The grand opening of the Davenport Community Library was a perfect autumn afternoon. The sun cast a golden glow on the building's facade of glass and reclaimed timber, a testament to Jennifer's vision of blending modernity with nature. The air buzzed with genuine excitement and admiration. City officials, patrons of the arts, and families from the neighborhood all gathered on the manicured lawn. Jennifer stood near the entrance, her daughter Hope, now a bright-eyed toddler, holding her hand. She felt a deep, unblemished sense of accomplishment. This building was the physical manifestation of her survival. Every beam, every pane of glass was a piece of her reclaimed self. Julian stood beside her, his usual stoic expression softened by an undeniable pride. He wasn't the billionaire titan today. He was just a brother beaming at his sister's triumph. "You did it, Jenny," he murmured, watching as a group of children ran laughing towards the dedicated kids section. "You've given them a gift." "We did it," she corrected him, squeezing his arm. It was in this perfect moment that the ghost appeared. It wasn't a physical presence, but something far more insidious in the modern age. Her friend Clara, her face pale with a mixture of anger and concern, pulled Jennifer aside. "Jennifer, I'm so sorry to do this now, but you need to see this," Clara whispered, holding out her phone. On the screen was a sleekly designed web page. The banner read, "Robert Thorne, The Unspoken Truth." It was a blog launched that very day. The main feature was an article written by Robert himself, accompanied by a professionally taken photograph. He looked different, thinner, with a carefully cultivated beard, wearing a simple grey sweater. He looked thoughtful, humbled. It was a calculated image of a fallen man seeking redemption. Jennifer's heart went cold as she began to read. The words were a masterpiece of manipulation, a venomous narrative cloaked in the language of therapy and accountability. "For 2 years I have remained silent." The post began. "I have been in a process of deep, painful self-reflection. I will not deny my faults. The pressure of building an empire, of living up to impossible expectations, created a monster in me. That night I made a terrible mistake, a single regrettable lapse in judgment, for which I have lost everything. I have and will continue to work on myself to understand the anger that led to that moment." So far, it was a textbook PR apology. But then it took a dark, vicious turn. But what the world doesn't know is the context. The story of my downfall wasn't about one mistake. It was a calculated corporate assassination, orchestrated by my former brother-in-law, Julian Davenport, a man who wields his generational wealth like a weapon. He saw me a self-made man, as unworthy of his sister. He used my personal failing as the perfect excuse to destroy me, a business rival he could never out-innovate in a fair fight. Jennifer felt the air leave her lungs. He was recasting himself as the victim. Jennifer. My dear. Jennifer was caught in the middle. The post continued, dripping with false sympathy. I believe she was a pawn in her brother's ruthless game. He poisoned her against me, isolating her and manipulating her until she saw me as nothing but a villain. Was I a perfect husband? No. But I loved her. I still grieve for the life we lost for our child, the son I had so hoped to raise, who I am now forbidden from even seeing. The mention of a son was a deliberate, cruel twist of the knife. He was erasing their daughter Hope, rewriting reality itself to suit his narrative. He ended the post with a chilling call to action. This blog is my attempt to reclaim my own story. The story of a flawed man, yes, but a man who was systematically destroyed by a power far greater and more sinister than anyone imagines. The blood rushed in Jennifer's ears. This was worse than the slap. The slap was a physical act of rage, a loss of control. This was a cold, calculated psychological assault. He was trying to poison her triumph, to plant seeds of doubt in the public mind, to gaslight her on a global scale. He was trying to take this her most beautiful day and burn it to the ground. Julian had read the post over her shoulder, his face hardening into a familiar mask of cold fury. "Harrison is on it," he said, his voice a low growl. "My lawyers will have this site shut down by morning. We'll sue him for defamation so hard he won't be able to afford a library card." His words were meant to be comforting, a promise of swift, overwhelming retaliation. But Jennifer shook her head, a new and unfamiliar fire igniting within her. She looked at Julian's anger, the same anger that had dismantled Robert's empire, and she realized it was the wrong tool for this fight. Robert wanted this. He wanted a war with Julian Davenport. It would validate his entire story of being the little guy crushed by a titan. It would make him a martyr. "No," she said, her voice shaking but firm. She looked from her beautiful finished library back to the poison on the phone screen. One was a monument to creation, the other a testament to destruction. "No, Julian," she repeated more strongly this time. She handed the phone back to Clara and met her brother's gaze. "You can't fight a ghost with a sledgehammer. He isn't a CEO anymore. He's just a narrative, a story. And if I let you fight him, it proves his point." She took a deep breath, the scent of new books and fresh paint from her library grounding her. "You saved me then. I will be forever grateful for that. But this time, this one is mine." For a week, Jennifer felt the weight of Robert's digital ghost. The blog post was shared thousands of times. Comment sections were filled with debate. While many saw through the manipulation, a vocal minority latched onto his narrative, defending him as a victim of cancel culture and the uber-rich elite. For the first time since leaving him, Jennifer felt a flicker of the old fear. The feeling of her reality being questioned, of her truth being twisted. Julian was a caged tiger, his entire being wired to act, to protect, to eliminate the threat. His team had prepared a multi-pronged legal and PR assault plan. "We can bury him in depositions for the next decade, Jenny," he insisted. "And we'd be wrestling with a pig in the mud." She replied, her voice calm. "We'd both get dirty, and the pig would like it. That's his arena, Julian. Lies, insinuations, drama. It's not mine." Her arena, she realized, was what she was sitting in right now. Her architectural firm's office, which was thriving with new commissions. Her arena was the library, which was already becoming a beloved community hub. Robert was trying to drag her into a fight about the past. She had to refuse the invitation and pull the world forward into her present. 2 weeks after the blog post appeared, Jennifer agreed to a single exclusive television interview. She chose Sarah Jennings, the same meticulous journalist who had helped expose the truth about Robert. The interview was not to be held in a sterile TV studio, but in the main reading room of the Davenport Community Library. The setting was a character in itself. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating the faces of people of all ages, reading, studying, and connecting. It was a backdrop of peace, purpose, and construction. Sarah Jennings was direct but respectful. After discussing the library and Jennifer's recent projects, she broached the topic. "Jennifer, your ex-husband, has recently made some serious allegations, painting himself as a victim of a corporate conspiracy. What is your response?" Jennifer looked directly into the camera. Her expression not one of anger or victimhood, but of serene, unshakable confidence. "Mr. Thorne is entitled to his own narrative." She began, her voice even and clear. "He is free to write any story he wishes about the past. But I have found that spending one's energy trying to rewrite history is a deeply unproductive exercise. Words can be twisted. The truth, however, is not just a story. The truth is what you build." She gestured gracefully to the library around them. "He says his world was torn down. At the same time, I chose to build this. A place for children to discover their first favorite book. A place for seniors to connect with their community. A place for someone to learn a new skill that could change their life." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze magnetic. "This is my response. Not words of denial, but actions of creation. So to answer your question about his story, I'm simply not interested in it. I am far more interested in the stories being written right here, every single day. Then came the checkmate. And to that end, she continued, I am proud to announce the launch of the Phoenix Foundation. Funded entirely by the profits from my firm, Phoenix will provide grants and professional mentorship to women who are restarting their careers after leaving abusive environments. We will help them get the licenses, the equipment, and the support they need to become architects, designers, artists, and entrepreneurs. We will help them build their own new worlds. It was a masterful stroke. She hadn't engaged in his petty drama. She hadn't refuted a single lie. She had simply risen above it, making his narrative of personal grievance seem small, selfish, and utterly irrelevant in the face of her forward-looking, constructive philanthropy. The interview was a sensation. It reframed the entire conversation. The public saw the stark contrast, a man consumed with rewriting his past versus a woman dedicated to building a better future for others. Robert's blog lost all traction, becoming a sad, lonely corner of the internet, a digital monument to his own bitterness. He had tried to haunt her feast, but she had responded by building a bigger table and inviting everyone else to join. Months later, Jennifer was pushing Hope on a swing in a park near their home. Julian was there throwing a soft ball for his niece to chase. The tense protective energy that once radiated from him was gone, replaced by a relaxed, easy affection. The first Phoenix grant was awarded today, he said, sitting on the bench next to her, to a young graphic designer from Chicago. She said her dream was to be her own boss. Jennifer smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile. That's wonderful. You handled him, Jenny. Better than I ever could have, Julian admitted. I know how to tear things down. You know how to build things up. She watched her daughter squealing with delight as the swing went higher and higher. The ghosts of the past were finally gone, not because they were vanquished in a fight, but because they had been crowded out by a life so full of light, love, and purpose. She was the architect, and she had designed a future more beautiful than she had ever imagined. And it was all her own. Jennifer's journey is a powerful reminder that the most formidable empires are not built of glass and steel, but of character and integrity. Robert Thorne's world collapsed because it was built on a foundation of ego and control. Jennifer, on the other hand, rebuilt hers on a foundation of courage, talent, and the quiet, unwavering support of family. This story shows us that true strength isn't about how loud you can shout, but about the resilience you show when you've been silenced, and the grace with which you reclaim your voice. It proves that no cage can hold a spirit that is determined to be free. If Jennifer's journey from victim to victor resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of quiet strength to overcome loud injustice, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories of consequence, justice, and empowerment. Thank you for listening.